Continue to support the European arrest warrant, that bit of legal machinery that allows the long arm of the law to reach across borders and speedily grab suspects who are wanted for serious crimes in other countries. There's a debate and a vote on it in the House of Commons this afternoon, and the Home Secretary, Theresa May, says she's going to argue loudly in favour, which may surprise you. But Ms May claims the warrant has already enabled 5,000 people to be extradited from the UK, including individuals wanted abroad in connection with 124 murders and 100 rapes. That may not be enough to satisfy her critics, though. The government is bracing itself for a rebellion by Conservative MPs. One of them, Dominic Raab, says the measure is a threat to the liberty of the British people and the sovereignty of the UK. As things stand, Britain's support for the European arrest warrant is due to expire on December the 1st, so the race is on for the government to sign up to it again before becoming, in the eyes of some, a safe haven for Europe's criminals. Let's talk to somebody who's in favour first, and that's Dominic Grieve, Conservative MP and former Attorney General. Why do you think we should still stay in this thing?
Because if we leave it, we will undoubtedly expose ourselves to the risk of having large numbers of criminals in this country who are wanted for serious offences abroad, whom we cannot extradite. And in those circumstances, there will be a serious security risk. Now, the European arrest warrant is not perfect. It's very unfortunate that the Labour government signed up to it in the Lisbon Treaty, and by signing up to it, moved it into the main architecture of the EU treaties. I think people don't always understand that. Before that, it was working and most people didn't complain about it. The change and the anxiety is over the fact that it is now part of the main EU treaties and could be subject to the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice.
So your concern is not that without it we can't get criminals back from other countries. It's that without it, other countries can't pull criminals out of this one.
Well, it works both ways. But one has to be pragmatic about this. I regret what Labour did in the Lisbon Treaty, but we have to live with what is. And if we were to try to revert to the position before the European arrest warrant came in, then we're having to face the fact that at times we're going to take years to extradite people. We had a case where a French terrorist who had done a bomb on the Paris Underground. It took us 10 years to get rid of him and transfer him to France between 1996 and 2006. We can't go back to that. Furthermore, the Home Secretary has done something quite important. In the last year, she's introduced two really important safeguards. The first one is a proportionality test, which will mean that you can ask the court to review whether it's proportionate that you should be extradited. So if it's a trivial offence, extradition won't go ahead. And secondly, if an offence for which extradition is sought is not, in fact, part of it's been committed in this country and it is not an offence here, you won't be extradited at all. So those are two really quite important safeguards which should improve matters. I'm the first to accept that this isn't a perfect system, but ultimately, if you are going to have an extradition system at all, it has to be dependent on the degree of mutual recognition. And we've been doing this. I think the first extradition treaty we ever had was in 1660 with Portugal. So it's worth bearing in mind that we have civilized countries, if we are to manage together to fight crime, have got to have extradition mechanisms. And I happen to think the European arrest warrant is not a bad one. It could do with some improvement, but the Home Secretary has done a number of safeguards, and in my view, she's entitled to support on this.
Thank you very much. Dominic Grieve, Conservative MP, and one of his colleagues, another Conservative MP, is here. On the other side of the fence on this, though, David Davis, former Shadow Home Secretary. What do you make of the Paris bomber story? We had this guy for 10 years under the old system before he finally got extradited.
Rashid Rumsha. He was not extradited because the British courts thought he'd been tortured. It was that in
France?
In France, that's right. He'd already been beaten in custody, and they thought he'd be tortured and or sent off to Algeria. So that was the reason. Very simple.
But that's crazy, isn't it?
Well, is it? I mean, the British courts made a judgment on the basis of the facts in front of them. You know,
the French are among our closest allies, or they were last time I looked.
Yeah, but they have some bad habits,
right,
which sometimes make it difficult to extradite people to them. And one of the problems of this system is it basically is aimed to bypass the courts. That's what it's about. It's bypassing the courts. And Dominic, he's a great friend of mine and he's a brilliant advocate, but he sort of let let the cat out the bag at the end there. He said, well, the point about this is mutual recognition of civilized countries. Well, Andres Simiu, who was extradited to Greece, left in a really nasty prison for a year, then left around in Greece for most of what would have been his undergraduate years at university, whilst they eventually decided he wasn't guilty because they'd got the evidence by beating up witnesses who retracted as soon as they got out of the country.
And the charge there was?
The charge there was murder. So it wouldn't have, the proportionality test wouldn't have applied, all the other tests wouldn't have applied. Right. And he basically lost a good chunk of his young life off the back of the Greeks. And there's another Greek case. Dominic Raab will raise it this afternoon. I'm not allowed to raise it, but he'll raise it in the House this afternoon. Another Greek case of really trumped-up non-justice. And this is the problem. We are required under the European arrest warrant to treat every other country in Europe as having a sort of equal justice system to our own. Well, I'm afraid Greece doesn't. Neither does Italy. Neither do a number of the ex-Soviet countries. Romania and Bulgaria, very, very good examples.
What about when we want to get people back from other countries? Is it not good then?
Yes, it can be. It can be. But, the most recent case of that was Aisha King. That wasn't exactly a demonstration of justice in action.
But that was the police here.
Didn't apply.
Yeah, sure. But that, okay, so with that case, to fill people in, that was the young boy who needed the hospital treatment, and his parents went off unilaterally, and then they used the European arrest warrant to get him back. However, that was the fault of the hospital and the police, not the system, wasn't it?
It's always the fault of the initiator. That's part of the problem. I mean, and the difficulty is here that there was a British citizen, as it turned out, being subject to bad treatment by the British state. Normally, it's other states. So this thing is full of holes. I mean, Dominic was very nicely saying, well, of course, it's not perfect. Of course it isn't. It's awful. It's a dreadful system. And frankly, we could have done so much better. If the government had this has been going on for years, remember. If the government had brought this to the House of Commons a year ago, and the House of Commons would probably have said to them, go away and negotiate a lot of bilateral treaties and put in proper respect. You see, we should deal differently with, let's say, Germany and Denmark with really, really good justice systems than we should with those who've got bad justice systems.
What about Osman Hussein, who was one of the 21-7 bombers or failed bombers, and then he did Rome, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. He went to Rome.
And we did get him out sharpish from there, and he's got a 40-year jail sentence.
That's right. Now,
that was good, wasn't it?
Yeah. Now, let's be clear where the benefits are. The benefits are it accelerates these things. Normally, however, a matter of weeks. We used to be under a thing, we still are actually, under the Council of Europe. We're under a 1959 convention which requires us to have extradition arrangements already. They're a bit slow, not as quick as the EAW, but that's because the justice has to take effect. But bear in mind, when they got him back here, they didn't actually convict him for a year, So a rush of a week or two is not exactly critical. But so long as he doesn't get away, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
Right? But against that, you are trading massive injustices against a significant number of British citizens.
The funny thing about this one is that you expect it to say, the argument to be, Britain is very, very efficient and the EU is very slow and cumbersome. It's actually the other way round here. Yeah. We take a long time over justice, and therefore it took us 10 years to get the Paris guy back to France. Yeah. This EU arrest warrant seems to work too quickly for you in some ways. It's too good.
Efficiency and justice aren't always the same thing.
Well, maybe that's true.
That's the thing. They're bypassing the courts. That's what it's about. This extradition treaty is about bypassing courts in this country to get people back.
But we can, if we want, the government here can put a brake on the extradition of somebody for various reasons, can't it? Occasionally it could flag and say, no, we're not doing this one.
Well, not per se. I mean, what it's done, to be fair to Theresa, she has put in place a bill which basically says it's got to be proportionate. In other words, you've got to have a potential sentence of more than 12 months. She says that you can't extradite until you're actually decided on charging. But unfortunately, charging is a British concept. Under most European law, you decide to pursue the case, the charge comes very late. So Julian Assange, for example, who's under a European arrest warrant, and I'm no great fan, so don't take this defence of him, he's under a European arrest warrant. The Swedes haven't decided to charge him. They want to question him. So these improvements are marginal improvements, but they don't solve the intrinsic problem. You can have a British citizen required to go back abroad under a trumped-up charge to face a justice system doesn't deserve the name. That's the real core problem.
Thank you very much indeed, David Davis, Conservative MP, former Shadow Home Secretary.
Oh, I can see that.